Dan Hurd has found thousands of dollars worth of gold. He has built a YouTube empire with more than 1.4 million subscribers and inspired an entire generation to pick up a pan and chase the prospector's dream. But behind all that success lies a story most people never hear. His first wife, the mother of his two sons, became a WWE legend, then died from an overdose at age 48. Dan raised those boys largely on his own. He spent decades grinding through a teaching career while secretly chasing gold on weekends. And just when everything finally seemed to come together, doctors told him his heart was failing and he needed emergency open-heart surgery to survive. I had a heart surgery about, 4 or 5 years ago now. And that kind of knocked me back quite a bit. I don't have quite the strength and stamina I had once before. Most people would have quit. Most people would have given up after the first tragedy, let alone the second or third. Dan Hurd didn't quit. And what he did next is exactly why more than 1 million people can't stop watching him. This is the heartbreaking story they don't tell you about YouTube's most famous gold prospector, the method behind the madness. Dan Hurd doesn't find gold by accident. He finds it because he understands something most amateur prospectors never learn: gold is lazy. It is 19 times heavier than water, which means it always sinks to the lowest point it can reach. While lighter materials wash downstream, gold drops into cracks, crevices, and bedrock pockets where it can sit undisturbed for thousands of years, bedrock with fractures and material captured down in those fractures right behind a great big obstacle. The prospector's job isn't digging for gold. It's understanding where gold has already collected itself. And Dan has spent more than 2 decades mastering exactly that. His prospecting style is distinctive. Rather than picking one spot and digging deep, he pans many shallow locations across wide areas. He reads the river like a book, looking for inside bends where water slows, bedrock exposures where gold gets trapped, and gravel bars that form natural collection points. He targets expiring mining claims in British Columbia and stakes them quickly before other prospectors can move in. The technique starts with sampling. Dan works a stretch of river, taking pan after pan from different spots, searching for color. When he finds it, he zeroes in. That's when the real work begins. His panning method is methodical. First, he submerges the pan and breaks up the material, letting clay dissolve. Then comes stratification, shaking the pan side to side underwater to let heavy materials sink while lighter sand rises. He tips it forward, washing away worthless stuff in layers, checking constantly for that telltale flash of yellow. The final reveal, when the black sand parts to show gold underneath, is what keeps prospectors coming back for more. The crazy part is the patience required. A single pan takes 5 to 10 minutes to work properly. Do it wrong and you wash your gold right out with the gravel. Dan has processed thousands upon thousands of pans over the years. I am out here gold panning on the Fraser River with my buddy Pioneer Polly. I told him today we're going to find him lots of gold. So, I've taken him to our best site where we know we can get gold in every pan because there's gold everywhere on the Fraser River. And this spot is really good. That experience shows in every precise movement he makes, but panning is just one tool in his arsenal. For crevicing, working gold out of bedrock cracks, Dan uses screwdrivers, picks, and suction bulbs. Gold loves to wedge itself into tight spaces, and extracting it requires finesse. He probes with a flathead screwdriver, loosens compacted material, then sucks it out with a snuffer bottle. The material goes into a bucket for later processing. He's pulled pickers, pieces big enough to pick up with your fingers, from crevices that other prospectors walked right past without a second glance. When working larger areas, the sluice box comes out. This portable metal trough uses running water to process material continuously. Gravel enters one end. Water carries away the light stuff and riffles along the bottom trap the gold. A good sluice run processes in hours what would take days by hand panning. His metal detector adds another dimension entirely. He swings it methodically over ground that looks completely barren, listening carefully for that distinctive tone. Most hits are junk, bottle caps, nails, shell casings from hunters, but occasionally it screams over a nugget sitting just inches below the surface, waiting to be found. The Fraser River claim remains his crown jewel. He has kept its exact location a closely guarded secret because the gold there is significant. Gold panning the Fraser River with my buddy Pioneer Paulie. We're going to find some gold today and lots of it. Multigram nuggets. Pickers that clink when they hit the pan. The kind of finds that make other prospectors' eyes go wide. Hands down, it's the most productive ground he's ever worked. The finds and the failures. Dan's videos aren't staged or faked for views. When gold appears on camera, it's real, and his audience can tell the difference. Some memorable finds include nuggets worth hundreds of dollars from spots that looked ordinary. With gold around $2,000 per ounce, even small finds add up fast. Here's the catch, though, he has had thousands of days finding absolutely nothing. That honesty built his audience. Dan doesn't pretend prospecting is a get-rich-quick scheme. He shows empty pans alongside spectacular finds, hikes that lead nowhere, claims that turn out worthless, and hours that produce only a few flakes worth pocket change. The delusions out there are real. People think they can spend one day and pull $1,000 from the ground. Dan has done that once or twice. Lucky days. Oh, okay. Oh, there we are. Yeah, there's the jackpot. We got some good gold in that pan. Oh, I found it. I found the jackpot. I'll do some more pans from there and see what we can do. But he reminds viewers he has had thousands of days finding nothing. Making a living on just finding gold is nearly impossible. The secret to his consistency is that he prospects like a scientist. He keeps notes on every location, maps where gold appears and where it doesn't. Over years, those notes become a database no amount of luck can replicate. The life before gold. Dan Hurd was born in 1956 in Penticton, British Columbia, where mining history seeps into the soil. His father, a mechanic, took him gemstone hunting as a boy, planting seeds that would take decades to bloom. When I was a kid, probably about 11 years old, my dad took me out gold panning. And we did that for a couple years, you know, in the summers, evenings after work type thing. We'd go out gold panning. In 1980, Dan married Luna Vachon. They had 2 sons, Joshua and Van, before divorcing in 1985. Luna became a WWE legend, one of wrestling's most iconic female performers. In 2010, she died from an overdose at age 48. Dan raised his boys while building a completely different career, the teacher's double life. For over 20 years, Dan lived 2 completely separate lives. By day, he taught technology education at Mount Boucherie Secondary School in West Kelowna, metalwork, woodworking, and eventually a mining course he developed himself from scratch. He became technology education department head, mentoring young people in practical skills while maintaining a stable career with benefits and a pension. He was the kind of teacher students remembered, hands-on, patient, genuinely interested in helping them learn. I was a shop teacher for a long time. Moved off into computer science where I taught digital animation, computer programming, that kind of computer stuff. And then for the last couple years of my career as a teacher, I was a career coordinator. Oh, cool. Helping kids get into careers. But on weekends and summers, Dan transformed into someone else entirely. He would drive hours into the British Columbia backcountry, hiking to remote river stretches nobody else bothered with. He staked claim after claim, learning which held promise and which were worthless. He built relationships with other prospectors, comparing notes and sharing hard-won knowledge about where gold might hide. It wasn't simple, though. Teaching full-time while prospecting seriously meant sacrificing sleep, social life, and the easy path of relaxing when school ended. Most people would have given up one or the other. Dan chose the harder road because he couldn't imagine not prospecting. The pull was too strong, something about standing in a river searching for treasure that had waited millions of years to be found. It filled a need that nothing else could touch. When Dan became a father, he started taking his sons prospecting, sharing the same experiences his own father had given him. Those trips planted seeds. They also reminded Dan why he had fallen in love with this pursuit in the first place. In July 2008, he started documenting his adventures on YouTube. The channel was modest at first, just a middle-aged guy with a camera showing what he found in the rivers. No fancy editing, no dramatic music, just authenticity. But viewers connected with something real. His teaching style, honed by decades in classrooms, made complex techniques accessible. His genuine excitement when gold appeared in the pan was contagious. And unlike so many content creators, Dan showed the failures alongside the wins. He wasn't selling a fantasy. He was sharing a journey, the heart that almost stopped. By 2020, Dan's body was sending signals he couldn't ignore anymore. Shortness of breath that came out of nowhere. Fatigue that wouldn't lift no matter how much he rested. The feeling that something fundamental was wrong inside his chest. Doctors discovered his mitral valve was failing. Without open-heart surgery, his heart would continue weakening until it simply gave out. For a man who had built his entire identity around physical outdoor work, hiking into remote areas, digging in cold rivers, hauling heavy equipment, the diagnosis devastated him. The surgery was successful, but recovery meant weeks away from the rivers and mountains that had defined his life for decades. Exactly a week ago today, I had open heart surgery. Yes, I've got a big scar. And they had to go in and repair my mitral valve inside there and get my heart pumping again because I was having some pretty bad health problems before. The first time Dan returned to the water after surgery, he almost didn't recognize himself. His legs shook on the hike in. His hands trembled loading his first pan. The cold river hit his waders, and he felt every degree in ways he never had before. Every single movement reminded him how close he had come to losing everything he loved, but the river didn't care about his medical history. It just flowed, the same as it had for millennia, carrying the same promise of gold, the sound of rushing water, the smell of wet gravel, the weight of a pan full of material. These sensations became medicine. The crazy part is what happened next. Dan started treating prospecting as physical therapy. Each trip pushed him further. Each hike rebuilt strength. The rhythm of panning, squat, shake, wash, repeat, became meditation that healed more than just his body. Within months, he was back to form. Within a year, he was finding gold again and documenting his comeback for an audience that worried they would never see him on the river again. Today, Dan reports being 95% healthier than before surgery. The experience changed his entire perspective on life. Life is shorter than we think. The things we love matter more than obligations. And sometimes, when everything else fails, a river can save you. The YouTube empire. Dan Hurd's channel became something unprecedented. 1.4 million subscribers, over 326 million total views, and more than 1,500 videos spanning nearly 2 decades. Estimated monthly revenue ranges from $6,000 to over $100,000 depending on views and sponsorships. Hands down, he is the most influential gold prospecting educator online. His videos cover everything beginners need: identifying promising ground, proper panning technique, staking legal claims, and backcountry safety. He reviews equipment, shares failures, and celebrates finds with enthusiasm that never feels manufactured. The community extends beyond YouTube. His online store sells gear and courses. His Patreon supports over 600 members with exclusive content. His wife Dana joins him on expeditions, becoming part of the channel's appeal herself. But ask Dan what matters most, and he won't mention subscriber counts. What the gold really means. Dan Hurd has spent decades searching for gold. He has worked hundreds of claims across British Columbia, from the Fraser River to remote creeks that don't even have names on maps. He has found nuggets worth thousands and pans worth nothing. He has experienced the highest highs and lowest lows this pursuit offers. Here's what he has learned after all these years: the gold was never really the point. The point was the search itself, standing in a river at dawn, surrounded by mountains that have stood for millions of years, doing work that connects him to something ancient and real. Sharing that experience with his sons when they were young, with Dana now, with his viewers, and with anyone willing to grab a pan and try. Prospecting doesn't make most people rich, Dan says that himself over and over. And I think everyone has that desire to either strike it rich or to find that thing that no one else has ever seen before, or possibly just find that thing that they've never found before. I think everyone has that desire whether they act upon it or not. There are too many delusions of grandeur out there. The real money comes from teaching, from content creation, from building something larger than any single gold find could ever provide. But the gold keeps him coming back. It always has. It always will. Because somewhere in the next pan, the next claim, the next river bend, there might be a nugget waiting, heavy and patient, 19 times heavier than water, settled into a crevice for 1,000 years, just waiting for someone stubborn enough to find it. Dan Hurd is that someone. After everything he has survived, the loss of his ex-wife, the open-heart surgery that nearly ended everything, the decades of grinding between classroom and riverbank, he is still out there, still prospecting, still finding gold, still teaching millions of people that the real treasure isn't always measured in ounces. The heartbreak didn't stop him. It taught him what really matters. Some people chase gold their whole lives and never find what they're looking for. Dan Hurd found something better. He found purpose. He found community. He found a reason to keep going when giving up would have been easier, and that's the real treasure. Want to learn gold prospecting from someone who has actually lived it through heartbreak and triumph? Check out Dan Hurd Prospecting on YouTube, subscribe to our channel and tell us below, what keeps you going when life gets hard? The river's waiting.